Howdy, my name is CXCD, and for the past year, I've been very involved in the community around this little show known as Make Your Mark, the 5th generation of My Little Pony. If there was any news, I was there for it. The tiniest piece of breadcrumb I snacked on. I know more about G5 than probably a lot of normal people do, right? And today I'm here to tell you why Generation 5 of MLP came out looking a little bit like this. It failed. Let me first define what I mean by failed, because just by using that word, I know a lot of people are gonna get quite angry at me for saying that. I love this generation. It's a generation. I think it's charming. I think it has a lot of potential, but the series never hit those same marks that Generation 4 did, you know? I'm saying that Generation 5 failed because A, toy sales are way down, and B, it's just not a very good successor to Friendship is Magic in almost every single way. It has an insane reliance on G4 for its story. Its animation qualities in the dumps, the lighting, the writing, especially in the early chapters, it's just not very good. The one thing that I think G5 does better than G4 is it tells a lot of darker stories. What do I mean by that, right? I mean, both of Sunny's parents are dead. Misty was practically full napped from her father, and whose father also lost his wife. But we're not here to compare G4 to G5, because that's what gets people on Twitter very angry at me. Instead, I'm going to tell you as blatantly and unbiased as possible what exactly went wrong with G5. Why do we get this as a final product? How do we go from the movie, which was wildly considered to be a great story and great animation, to the series, where it's almost genuinely insulting how far the series fell? Well, sit down, bud. I'm gonna tell you a tale. The tale of how G5 fell. Before we start, I want to say that as boldly as possible, nothing here is confirmed. Everything I say can be true or not. This is what I believe to be factual information, but I'm very aware that all of this is based on speculation. It's sitting on pillars of sand. Maybe in 10 years' time, when everything blows over and now we're on Generation 6, right? People will come up from the production and tell the real truth about what actually happened behind the scenes. And it might turn out that everything I say in this video is untrue. I'm just some hick YouTuber from Michigan. I'm not a fly on the wall when all this happened. So, let's start off at the very beginning. G5 began production way back in 2017. As far as I can tell, all of this was simply just early tests. I don't think this was really meant to make it out to the public, and was meant for people internally to get an idea of what G5 would look like if they decided to make a new generation. Eventually, G4 came to an end, wrapping up quite gracefully. DHX Media, the guys who made FIM, moved on to greener pastures, and that left MLP completely within Hasbro's hands, and they decided to make a movie to kick off Generation 5. The movie went through a couple versions. It was originally a G4 reboot, but slowly morphed into its own separate thing. In 2021, we got our very first leak in the form of a bedsheet set for some reason. By the way, these guys lost their licensing agreement with Hasbro because of this. It was a peek at 3 characters we've never seen before, and little did we know this would be the main cast of G5. But behind the scenes, something was brewing. The movie was originally supposed to be released theatrically, aka in movie theaters, which would have been awesome, but for some reason, it fell through. Paramount, the guys who were supposed to do that, they decided they didn't want to go through the effort of releasing it in movie theaters, except for in Russia for some reason, and they decided to let go of the rights. The rights floated in free fall for a while, before none other than Netflix decided they really wanted the movie on their platform. But think about that for a second. There's an alternate reality where A New Generation, the movie, was being shown at movie theaters. You could walk into your local theater and watch MLP, just like 2017. But unfortunately, and for whatever reason, Paramount just wanted nothing to do with it. This was the first of many corporate shenanigans that will kill G5. But eventually, the movie did release, and it released to widespread acclaim, except for the critics. The critics called it basic, and that's because you're basic! People did really love this movie. It was a great movie. It had good backstory, and the world building was on par, if not better than FIM's world building. Every time I go back to this movie, I just get whiplash from how genuinely great this movie is. The animation was great, if not sometimes a little janky. The lighting was awesome. The script, although like the critics said, quite basic, was also really good. It introduced us to all these characters, and it made us actually really like them. I cannot understate how good of a first step this movie really was. It set the tone for G5 really well. It utilized some of FIM as plot points, sure, but it wasn't necessarily going to heavily lean on it. People were ecstatic to see what would come next. And good thing too, because Hasbro was set up to release 2 G5 shows. One was a more traditional 22-minute long TV show, and the other one was a 5-minute clip show to release alongside the first one. It was called Make Your Mark and Tell Your Tale, but always in the background, humming like an annoying mosquito, there were doubters. People who hated G5 simply because it existed. These people frowned and shook their head, believing that G5, no matter what, was gonna be a failure. And it hurts to say, guys, but we're not living in the good timeline. Make Your Mark released the first of 6 chapters in May of 2002. People excitedly clambered to the TV screen. Finally, 3 years after FIM ended, we were watching a new show! Was it gonna hold a candle to FIM? Was it gonna even be good? Maybe it was gonna be great! Everyone watched it with bated breath as finally, the Netflix logo played, and the show began. It was rough. Have you ever experienced that sinking feeling before? That feeling of knowing that something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Like when you get a school test back and seeing a big fat F on the front page. People watching Make Your Mark felt that as they watched their favorite franchise be absolutely torn to shreds. The doubters were right. Make Your Mark was everything they said it would be. Sloppy, unfinished, bad. It didn't hold a candle to FIM, not even close. It didn't hold a candle to G3 or G1. It was genuinely, without kidding, an absolute travesty. And then Chapter 2 released. And then something funky started happening. Trust me, Make Your Mark still wasn't very good. No, actually, far from it. But there were moments, strange glimpses into what Make Your Mark could have been. For a second, the animation quality would skyrocket, and you were like you were watching the movie again. Every few episodes had a script that was just genuinely a really good script. Portrait of a Princess isn't considered one of Make Your Mark's greatest episodes. It's considered one of MLP's greatest episodes. And then the very next episode, Alicon, was considered one of MLP's worst. It's like there's just no in-between. Either the episodes are great or they're awful. This pattern basically continued for all 6 chapters. As the series went on, the chapters got progressively better and better. Chapter 3 was once again a ginormous dip in quality, but then Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 are genuinely pretty enjoyable. It's just such a shame that Make Your Mark fumbled so hard out the gate. Because the series actually did get, well, I wouldn't say good, but decent. Tell Your Tale didn't fare much better either. For its entire first season, Tell Your Tale has felt more like TikTok brain rot in MLP form than an actual series. But much like Make Your Mark, Tell Your Tale got better when its second season came out. And for that matter, it's still coming out and it's still really good. So, I propose this question. What the heck happened? Why did G5 come out in such a sorry, unfinished, unpolished state? I'm gonna once again reiterate the point I said earlier. I'm not a fly on the wall, although I wish I was. I am not a fly on the wall. I don't actually know what happened behind the scenes. Like I said, either none of this could be true, or all of it could be true. I just don't know. This is simply information I picked up on the past year and a half of being in this community, okay? And now I'm going to present it to you all. As we know, or probably just I do, A New Generation was made by a few different companies. The first one was Hasbro, obviously. The second one was Entertainment One, and finally there was Boulder Media. As far as I can tell, E1 and Boulder Media both collaborated on animating this film, and it was Hasbro's property. And I think Boulder Media was the one to make the script. I'm not entirely sure on that. And when it's time to make the animated series to go along with A New Generation, that responsibility fell on Boulder Media's shoulders. I mean, Boulder Media had already worked on A New Generation, so it's gonna be easy, right? Right? They started work on an unnamed MLP project. I don't know its name, but I know there's concept art of it, so it definitely existed at some point. I don't know how far this project got, but I'd like to think it got at least decently far. If you'll notice, it actually looks quite a bit like Tell Your Tale, doesn't it? Don't worry, I'll get back to this, but basically, this series was literally FIM, but G5. It presumably used puppet-based animation just like FIM. It was 22 minutes long, just like FIM. It was season-based, just like FIM. This, ladies and gentlemen, was what G5 should have been. This series right here was everything you ever wanted, and unfortunately, it got canned. Why exactly? Well, let Let me tell you why. In this time, Hasbro was suffering from something called post-COVID burnout, which basically meant that they were hurting for some money, and they had to sell some companies. One of those companies was Boulder Media. Dang it. And along with Boulder Media was this MLP project that unfortunately had to be canned. Now, I do want to make it very clear, Boulder Media didn't actually leave Hasbro's care until November of 2022, which was a long time after Make Your Mark had started debuting in May of 2022. I'm saying that Boulder Media knew it was being sold a long time before it was actually sold. I'd imagine that, right? I don't think you can just, like, decide to sell a company after, like, a bender one night, right? Boulder Media had to wrap up any projects that were still unfinished, and that meant canceling their 2D MLP animated show, because it obviously wasn't going to be done before they were sold, right? So, now MLP didn't have a main show. Great. Now what? Well, Hasbro then decides to give the project to Entertainment One, E1. They already worked on the movie, so it should be no problem, right? Well, maybe not, because they decided to switch the series to 3D and completely start over from the beginning. There's no evidence that they used anything from the 2D series. There's evidence that literally this was just completely scrapped and E1 started completely new. This is where Make Your Mark, as we know, started. You see, there's a reason why people want a 2D animated show. It's cause it's cheaper. And when it's cheaper, that means it's less expensive to make a great big sets for a single episode. I mean, look at season 1 of FIM. When they all go to Appaloosa, they made an entire town that didn't show up again until season 4. They made this whole town for a single episode. If you want to do that in 3D, well, fucking good luck doing it in a reasonable time frame, and good luck paying the modelers, the texturers, the set designers, the concept artists, I mean, versus 2D where, I mean, concept art, someone draws it, like, you're done. Simply put, you can just have more creative control with your scripts in 2D rather than 3D. If you want the ponies to go to some black market in 2D, sure, no problem. People will draw up backgrounds for the ponies to go to. In 3D, well, let's make sure it's a main set piece for multiple episodes so we don't waste our money. I mean, I'm not saying 3D is bad. As a matter of fact, 3D can do everything 2D can do and more. It's just that for a cartoon show on a shoestring budget, 3D is just really not a good idea. Anyways, E1 are now making this series. For better or for worse, they begin reusing assets from the movie, as they're the ones who helped make it, so they have access to the assets, right? Make Your Mark, in its modern day form, begins taking shape. And then Hasbro started discussing selling E1. Dang it! Great. That's just great. I believe that just like Boulder Media, I believe these guys were told beforehand they were going to be sold, so they quickly just, you know, canceled their projects and handed this half-baked show back to Hasbro. Hasbro now has a tough job of finding some poor, unsuspecting company to finish animating this thing, and they landed on the small animation company named Atomic Cartoons. Atomic Cartoons, these poor guys. They've been shit on for the better part of 2 years. These guys were handed a half-complete 3D animated series just months before it was supposed to go gold. And so with this half-baked pie, and not enough time to bake a pie, they had to figure out how to cook this pie, and they are forced to burn it. Make Your Mark was handed off 3 times during its development, and restarted once. It was given to another company with just not enough time to finish it, and they had to make do with what they had. That's why the scripts and the animation got better as the series went on, because they got more and more time to make it with each chapter. They had more time to go back and rewrite the scenes as time went on. Reanimate scenes or just finish them, damn it. I had more to this script, but I unfortunately ran out of time to record. What ended up happening was Make Your Mark released 2 mixed reviews, and the concept art for that original 2D series was then reused for Tell Your Tale. Reason why Tell Your Tale looks so much more like this 2D series was because it uses the exact same concepts from that 2D series. It's not the same, trust me. This concept art is regularly confused for Tell Your Tale concept art. It's not. Tell Your Tale just used it for their series. It's actually very interesting to know that this 2D series was in development during the development of A New Generation, and I think that's why Opaline and Misty both show up in A New Generation, which means that this 2D show got far enough to at least introduce those characters. And I believe what we eventually got for the final product is basically just one very long telephone game, a bastardization of what it was supposed to be. So, in short, Make Your Mark came out the way it did because of A, corporate incompetence, 2, corporate negligence, C, tight deadlines, and triangle, The animators were simply not provided sufficient resources. I think Boulder Media genuinely wanted to make a good TV show. It could be looked upon at the same level as FIM. Of course, I don't know this. It could have been as bad, if not worse, than Make Your Mark, but they did amazing work on the movie, so I would have assumed that level of quality would have continued on to the 2D show. I think E1 wanted to make a very good 3D show, but they were dropped. And I think Atomic Cartoons was handed a grenade with its pin pulled. It really does suck what happened to G5. I think it could just be all boiled down to G5 was simply caught in the crossfire. You don't need much more information than that, honestly. Things were happening, corporate was reshuffling, and G5 was just a casualty. So now you're all caught up to speed on why I think Make Your Mark failed. Oh, by the way, I did try to get all this fact-checked in the G5 Discord server. It didn't go very well.
Hello. I've been doing some research the past hour or so, and I just wanted to make sure I have this timeline right of the show. Could anyone correct me if I get anything wrong?
If the G5 main 6 were dog breeds, which ones would they be?
So you can't blame me for trying, right? They just ignored me. So, that's about it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe. And remember, kids, always intolerate intolerance. Good Lord.